A brand new electric car, 4 seats, air conditioning, a touchscreen, power windows, and it costs less than $5,000. Not 20 years ago, not in some forgotten era of cheap manufacturing. Today, at first glance, it looks like just another tiny city car from China. But within weeks of appearing online, it sparked a debate that had almost nothing to do with electric vehicles. Around the same time, nearly 7,000 miles away in Massachusetts, a 72-year-old woman woke up inside her aging sedan. After decades of working, she could no longer afford rent. Every morning, she folded her blanket, drove to a nearby parking lot, and tried to begin another ordinary day from the driver's seat of the only home she had left. At first, these two stories seem completely unrelated. One is about an unbelievably cheap Chinese electric car. The other is about an American grandmother sleeping in her vehicle. Different countries, different people, different problems. But they are connected by one uncomfortable question. How did a $5,000 car end up exposing something much bigger than transportation? Because this isn't really the story of a tiny electric car. It's the story of why, for millions of Americans, even an ordinary life has quietly become something they can no longer afford. This is just another cheap Chinese car. The first reaction most people have when they see this little car is almost predictable. It's probably terrible. After all, we've been taught to associate cheap with low quality. If something costs only $5,000, it must be missing something important. Maybe it's unsafe. Maybe it's painfully slow. Maybe it barely qualifies as a car. That assumption lasts only until people actually look inside. The little electric car has 4 seats. It has air conditioning, it has a digital display, it has electric windows. It looks simple, but it doesn't feel unfinished. More importantly, it performs exactly the job it was designed to do. Not to cross the United States, not to tow a boat, not to impress the neighbors, just to take someone to work, to the grocery store, to school, or to a doctor's appointment. And suddenly, the conversation changes because people stop asking, "Is this a good car?" They start asking something much more interesting. "Wait, how much did you say it costs?" That's when the number changes everything. $5,000. Most Americans who first see the vehicle don't guess anywhere close to that figure. Many assume $20,000. Others guess $30,000. Some even think it's another premium electric vehicle hiding behind a small body. Then comes the reveal. Less than $5,000. For a few seconds, nobody talks about battery range or horsepower anymore. Instead, everyone asks the same question. If a brand new electric car can exist at this price, why have we accepted that affordable transportation is impossible? That question has almost nothing to do with China. It has everything to do with America. Americans don't want tiny cars. For years, one explanation has been repeated over and over again. Americans simply don't like small cars. They want large SUVs, big pickup trucks, 3-row crossovers, more space, more power, bigger engines. On the surface, the numbers seem to support that idea. But sales figures only tell us what people bought. They don't tell us what millions of people wished they could afford. Look beyond suburban driveways and a very different America begins to appear. A college student trying to avoid another year of expensive car payments, a retired couple who only drive a few miles each day, a home healthcare worker visiting patients across town, a grocery store cashier commuting every morning before sunrise. None of these people are looking for luxury. They're looking for something much simpler. A reliable way to keep living their lives without another bill pushing them closer to financial collapse. And that's where the story becomes much bigger than one tiny car. Because if millions of Americans still need affordable transportation, the real question isn't whether the demand exists. The real question is why America stopped building for them. That assumption completely falls apart when you meet people like Judith. At 72 years old, she never imagined her retirement would look like this. After decades of working, rising housing costs eventually pushed her out of the apartment she could no longer afford. Her aging sedan slowly became her bedroom, her storage unit, and the only place she could call home. Every morning, she folded away her blankets before the parking lot filled with other cars, hoping nobody would notice she had spent another night inside. Judith doesn't need a luxury SUV. She doesn't need 3 rows of seating. She doesn't need a vehicle capable of towing 6,000 pounds. She needs transportation that doesn't threaten the rest of her budget. And she's far from alone. Across America are students, retirees, delivery workers, caregivers, part-time employees, and people working multiple jobs simply to stay afloat. For millions of them, a car isn't a lifestyle statement. It's the one thing standing between a paycheck and unemployment. The surprising truth is that America never stopped needing affordable transportation. It simply stopped building enough of it, which raises an even bigger question. If millions of people still need small, practical vehicles, who is actually designing for them? The answer takes us thousands of miles across the Pacific, because while America was making its vehicles bigger, 2 countries were quietly moving in exactly the opposite direction. Small cars are a compromise. For many Americans, the word small immediately suggests sacrifice, less comfort, less safety, less status, a vehicle you buy only because you have no other choice. But in Japan, that belief has never really existed. Walk through almost any Japanese city and you'll notice something unusual. Streets are narrow, parking spaces are small, homes are compact, every square foot matters. Instead of constantly fighting those limitations, Japan designed an entire transportation system around them. That's why K-cars became so successful. They aren't tiny because Japan couldn't build larger vehicles. They're tiny because for millions of people, larger vehicles simply solve the wrong problem. China reached a surprisingly similar conclusion, although for very different reasons. As cities expanded and millions of first-time buyers entered the market, the biggest challenge wasn't building faster sports cars or larger SUVs, it was making mobility affordable. Companies began asking a question that many Western manufacturers had quietly stopped asking. What's the smallest, simplest vehicle that still improves someone's daily life? That philosophy produced neighborhood electric vehicles, compact city EVs, and inexpensive transportation designed around short commutes rather than long highway trips. Suddenly, affordability became part of the design instead of an obstacle to overcome. This is where many people misunderstand both Japan and China. Neither country built small cars because they lacked engineering talent. They built them because they optimized for everyday life instead of maximum size. That's a completely different philosophy. Instead of asking, how much more can we add, they kept asking, what does someone actually need? It's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. And here's the uncomfortable part. America once understood that philosophy too. Small, affordable cars weren't always rare. In fact, there was a time when they were everywhere. So what changed? America forgot how to build cheap cars. At first glance, the answer seems obvious. Technology became more advanced. Safety standards became stricter. Cars became more complicated. That explanation sounds reasonable, but it also hides a much more important truth. Because if engineers in China can still build a brand new electric car for around $5,000, then America's problem probably isn't engineering at all. It might be something far more powerful. The business model itself. If you ask why America's cheapest new cars now cost well over $20,000, you'll usually hear the same explanations. Inflation, labor costs, environmental regulations, safety requirements. Those factors are real. They all increase the cost of building a vehicle. But they don't explain the entire story. Because over the same period, manufacturers also became dramatically better at designing cars, automating factories, and improving production efficiency. In theory, those advances should have made many vehicles cheaper to build. Instead, something very different happened. Automakers gradually discovered that bigger vehicles generated much bigger profits. A compact economy car might earn only a small margin. A full-size SUV could earn several times more. A pickup truck could become one of the most profitable consumer products in the entire country. From a business perspective, the decision became obvious. Why convince someone to buy a $15,000 car when financing could convince them to buy a $50,000 SUV instead? Over time, product lineups slowly changed. Affordable models disappeared. Small cars were discontinued. Entire categories quietly vanished from dealership lots. Not because Americans suddenly became incapable of driving compact cars, because companies increasingly earned more money selling something else. That shift changed more than the vehicles themselves. It changed what Americans began believing was normal. A monthly payment of $600 or $700 became ordinary. 7-year auto loans became ordinary. Rolling debt from one vehicle into the next became ordinary. Buying more vehicle than you actually needed became ordinary. Some families now spend almost as much every month on transportation as previous generations once spent on housing. Without realizing it, affordability stopped being the goal. Monthly payments became the goal. This is why the $5,000 Chinese EV feels so shocking. Not because it's technologically impossible, because it reminds people that another path still exists. It forces an uncomfortable comparison. If transportation can be this affordable somewhere else, why has it become so expensive here? But even that question doesn't go far enough, because the car itself isn't the biggest expense most Americans face anymore. Something else has quietly become even harder to afford. Cars are the problem. It's easy to blame cars. After all, they're expensive. Fuel costs more than it used to. Insurance premiums continue climbing. Maintenance never seems to get cheaper. So naturally, many people assume transportation is the crisis. But transportation is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Think about Judith again. Even if someone handed her a brand new $5,000 electric car tomorrow morning, would that solve the problem? Not really. She would still need somewhere to park it overnight. She would still need affordable housing. She would still need health insurance. She would still need groceries that don't become more expensive every year. She would still need enough retirement income to cover the basics. The car might help, but it wouldn't solve the reason she was sleeping inside a vehicle in the first place. That's when the story begins to change. The $5,000 car isn't exposing a transportation crisis. It's exposing an affordability crisis. Housing has become more expensive. Healthcare has become more expensive. Insurance has become more expensive. Education has become more expensive. Childcare has become more expensive. Transportation simply joined a list that was already growing longer every year. The result is a feeling millions of Americans now recognize immediately. Working harder no longer guarantees getting ahead. For many families, it simply means falling behind more slowly. This is why the little Chinese EV became such a powerful symbol online. People weren't only reacting to the price of the car, they were reacting to the possibility that something essential could still be affordable. Not luxurious, not premium, just affordable. That idea feels surprisingly radical today, and perhaps that's the most revealing discovery of all. When people become excited about a car simply because it's inexpensive, they're telling you something much bigger than what they want to drive. They're telling you what they're struggling to afford. That brings us to one final question. If America responded to rising costs by financing bigger purchases, why did countries like Japan and China respond in almost exactly the opposite way? Because their answer wasn't simply to build different cars. It was to rethink what an affordable life should actually look like. America's problem is cars. By now, it's tempting to conclude that America simply needs cheaper cars. Build more compact vehicles, lower prices, give people affordable transportation again. problem solved. Except, that isn't what Japan and China actually teach us. The real lesson isn't about building smaller vehicles. It's about designing an entire lifestyle around affordability. In Japan, affordability isn't achieved by making people poorer. It's achieved by reducing the amount of expensive things people need. Cars fit narrow streets and small parking spaces. Compact apartments reduce housing costs. Reliable public transportation allows many families to own fewer vehicles. Small neighborhood shops reduce travel distances. Nothing is oversized simply because it can be. The system quietly asks one question over and over again: what is enough? That mindset doesn't eliminate financial pressure, but it prevents unnecessary costs from becoming permanent parts of everyday life. China arrived at affordability from a different direction. Instead of reducing demand, it focused on reducing production costs. Companies simplified vehicles instead of endlessly adding new features. Factories scaled production at extraordinary speed. Supply chains became tightly integrated. The goal wasn't necessarily to build the world's most luxurious car. The goal was to make personal transportation available to millions of first-time buyers. The result is that affordability became a competitive advantage instead of an outdated business model. America, meanwhile, gradually optimized for something else: larger homes, larger vehicles, longer commutes, longer financing, higher monthly payments, more premium features, more subscriptions, more debt stretched across more years. None of these decisions seemed dramatic on their own, but together, they quietly changed the cost of ordinary life. 3 countries, 3 different philosophies. Japan asked, "How can people live well with less?" China asked, "How can we build more for less?" America increasingly asked, "How can we finance more?" That difference is far bigger than automobiles. It shapes how entire societies experience everyday life. This story was about a $5,000 car. Let's go back to where we started, a tiny electric car from China. At first, it looked like the story. It dominated headlines, sparked online debates, generated millions of views. People argued about its quality, its safety, and whether it could ever succeed in America. But none of those questions turned out to be the most important one. Think about Judith one last time. She never asked for a luxury vehicle. She wasn't dreaming about a faster car. She wasn't comparing horsepower or touchscreen sizes. She simply wanted something that millions of Americans once took for granted: a stable place to live, affordable transportation, the ability to grow older without constantly worrying about the next bill. In many ways, Judith and that tiny Chinese EV are connected by the same invisible thread, not because one could solve the other's problems, but because both expose how expensive ordinary life has quietly become. That's the real reason this little car captured so much attention. It wasn't because everyone suddenly wanted to import a $5,000 Chinese EV. It was because millions of people looked at that price and imagined something they hadn't felt in a long time: relief. For a brief moment, they imagined what it would feel like if one essential part of life didn't require years of debt. And perhaps that's why this story resonated far beyond the auto industry. Because deep down, people weren't reacting to the car. They were reacting to the possibility that everyday life didn't have to cost this much. Maybe that's the biggest misunderstanding of all. This was never a story about China. It was never a story about electric vehicles. It wasn't even really a story about cars. It was a story about affordability, about the quiet disappearance of the ordinary American life that previous generations often took for granted. A life where buying a modest car didn't require a 7-year loan, where retirement didn't mean sleeping inside a vehicle, where good enough wasn't considered a failure. The tiny $5,000 car didn't create America's cost of living crisis. It simply exposed it. Sometimes the most powerful inventions don't change the world because they're revolutionary. They change the world because they force us to ask a question we can no longer ignore. If a tiny car can make millions of Americans wonder why ordinary transportation has become so expensive, what else has quietly become unaffordable without us even noticing? Because once you start asking that question, you realize this was never about a $5,000 car. It was about the price of an ordinary life.